This is the sticky bags experiment. Okay, so what you're going to need is some plastic bags. Now these are just thin plastic food bags. Okay, they should be fine for my experiment. You need a container that you can tuck them into. Now there's all sorts of things you could use, hint for variable there, but I'm going to use this glass, partly because I want you to see what's happening inside, and it's about the size I need. And my hands are quite big, but whatever you use, you've got to be able to fit your hand down inside, just about, mine's all only just about fitting in here, and the bag has to fit loosely. In fact, the way to test the container you're going to use, and be careful if you're going to use glass, but I would test it first by just putting the bag over the top, and if it fits nice and loosely, it'll work, because you'll see why in a minute. So just test it that way. It doesn't have to be quite as loose as that, but as long as it does fit over it. What I want you to do first is take your bag, and there's a couple of spares I'm going to use there, and push it over the top and push it down inside the glass or the container you're using. I'm going to talk about the glass here. Now, of course, my hands are in the way, it's a bit sticky, so I'm going to find something to push it down. Now, I've got a pencil here, I could ram it in with that, just to make sure it's nice and evenly in. Best I can. Of course I could use the candle because it's a bit thicker and it might be a bit easier, but I'll leave you to decide what you're going to use to push the bag into the container. Your container may be easily wide enough to get a hand in anyway. What I want you to do, the first thing to do, which I'm actually going to do in front of you, but just to test it for yourself, is just to grip it and pull the bag out and notice how much force you need to do that. Okay, so pull the bag out. Okay, I think even watching me do it, you can think, didn't seem to use much force. But anyway, I want you to do it, because scientists should always check for themselves. Now repeat the same thing. Put the bag back in. Try and get it right in properly. Okay, this time I want you to fold the top of the bag over the container you're using, for me the glass. Now we've got two ways of doing this. I can either just grip it very firmly and very tightly with one hand, but what I'd rather do is use an elastic band to hold it on. So I've got some elastic bands here, and I'll probably just use a couple of these bands. Okay, so just make sure they're strong, and in fact I'm going to double it around, cross it over, because I want it to make it a good grip. Okay, so I'm going to put my elastic bands on like that, and be careful. And if you're not quite sure if it's made a good grip, put a couple more on. Okay, you can't have too many in this experiment. Okay, just to prove it to you, I'm going to use one more. Okay, right, so that's the first bit. Now what I want you to do is see how easy it is to pull the bag out now. Off you go. Okay, I don't know what happened with you, but let's show you what happens when I do it. Pull, a bit harder already. So, look what happened when I pulled it, the whole bag tore and an obvious pop happened. What's going on? So, why should it be that we can pull one out really easily when it wasn't fixed in too tightly, and just by putting elastic bands over the edges, suddenly it becomes really hard, and eventually you have to pull it so hard it tears the bag with a loud pop? What's going on? Well, let's have a little think of how we first did it. You remember we put the bag in, and Blade just pushed it in like this, and of course pushing the bag in, of course for the bag to go into the glass, it has to push some air out of the way. Okay, and of course the air was being pushed up around the sides. It was fitted loosely, so to get it out of the glass, I can just pull it, and as I pull it, of course, it will make a gap underneath, and that gap has to be filled by air. And of course the air is drawn in around the sides as I pull it out, so it's quite easy. Now we couldn't see the air moving back in because it's invisible, but if we could have seen it, you would have seen the air going back in around the sides of the bag as I pulled it out, and it was easy to do. Once we, however, put the bag back in, let's just ram it back in there with the candle. And remember, the difference now was that I had it over the edge of the glass and the elastic bands round. To pull it out now, again, we still need to pull it out, and as it comes out, we'll make a gap underneath and make that gap bigger. It's got to fill that space. but this time the air can't get in because we've sealed it. We had the elastic bands around as well to make it even more of a seal. So I was pulling and pulling, and of course it's trying to make a gap there, but it needs to fill that gap. And because the air couldn't get in, the pressure got lower and lower and lower, because what gas was in there had to take up more room that we were making, so the pressure went lower and lower and lower. It was using up more space. And as I was pulling harder and harder and harder, the pressure inside, and I might even be able to do it with my hand like this now, got lower and lower and lower, and eventually the pressure outside was so high compared to the low pressure inside the glass that the high pressure air outside actually suddenly forced its way through the plastic and broke it. This time it didn't pop, but it fractured away and pushed its way in. Okay, so that's why you couldn't pull it out. You couldn't pull it out because no air could get in to replace the space that you were making. Okay, variables, what could we change? Well, I already hinted at this when I was giving you the early instructions on this one. I've told you, of course, I'm using this glass, and I suggested that you might find something else to use instead. So there's your first variable. How about trying different containers? Of course, as long as the bags you're using fit the container in a similar way to this, that's fine. What about, by the way, doing something a bit more familiar to people who actually deal with the rubbish in your house? Use a bin bag on a bin, maybe like one you'd have in an office, like a waste paper bin in an office, which are normally about this big, with a bin bag that fits that, and do a similar thing. You may not be able to find an elastic band big enough to go around the top, but you can always wrap some string around the top on that one, instead of elastic band, or some elastic stuff you can put around it, and do a similar thing. That would be really interesting for you to do. So try different size containers. What about if we use the same container, but try and find bags of different thicknesses? Now this one is quite a thin material really, so what about trying to find a plastic that's a bit thicker and a bit tougher? I wonder what that would do. Would it make it easier or more difficult to pull out? Or obviously you may find something thinner. What about paper bags? These are plastic bags, so what about if we had a paper bag and put a paper bag in? You have to be a bit careful as you manoeuvre it around, you don't want to tear it, but try a paper bag and put that in and pull that in instead. Now there's just a few ideas. I'm sure you could probably think of some more.